Welcome to The Drowsy Dwarf, where we read through some old white dwarfs whilst you go to sleep. Today is our first episode, and we're going to be looking at issue 178 from October 1994. The front cover of this shows a barbarian holding a sword and an axe as he fights alongside Empire legions and dwarves against a horde of orcs and undead. The inside page shows some heavy metal pictures for Blood Bowl star players and goblins, including Count Luther von Drakenborg, Håkon Heartripper Dark Elf Assassin, 4 goblins, and Count Luther transfixes the orc thrower as the goblins wait to receive the pass. The contents reads: Cover Dungeon of Doom by Geoff Taylor. CW and Citadel News, all the latest news from Games Workshop and Citadel Miniatures, page 2. Into the Maelstrom by Andy Chambers. Andy considers the history of the epic game system and explains how the new Titan Legions box set adds the destructive power of Emperor-class Titans and Orc Megagargants to the Space Marine game, page 7. Warhammer's Armies painting guide by McVey. This month sees the release of the latest volume in the heavy metal series of books, the Warhammer Armies painting guide. Mike explains that the new book is all about and gives us a sneak peek of the Orcs and Goblins section. The Leman Russ by Rick Priestley. The Leman Russ battle tank is the bane of the Imperium's enemies. With the release of the stunning new plastic kit, Rick provides the background rules, data facts, and 4 new vehicle cards that allow you to feature the Leman Russ in your Warhammer 40,000 games, on page 25. On page 28, Heavy Metal, Studio Heavy Metal Team, Leman Russ Battle Tank. On page 31, The Mailed Fist, Ian Pickstock. Ian takes a detailed look at vehicle tactics in Warhammer 40,000 battles. On page 39, Lord of the Dragons by Rick Priestley. Prince Imric, Lord of Dragons, is an exciting new character model for High Elf armies in Warhammer. Rick sets out the rules and describes a special new magic item for this warrior. On page 35, 40 and 42, Heavy Metal, Studio Heavy Metal Team show off Elder jet bikes, Chaos Warriors and Flesh Hounds of Khorne, and new epic war machines. On 43, The Titan Legions by Rick Priestley. Rick delves into the arcane history of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Dark Age of the Imperium of Man. And finally, on page 52, A Gauntlet of Fear by Jake Thornton and Gavin Thorpe. This month's Warhammer battle is a bloody clash between an Empire army and an Orc and Horde. This game demonstrates the application of a sound tactical principle in a Warhammer game. News: Warhammer. Prince Imric. This month sees the release of a magnificent new High Elf character model, Prince Imric, Lord of the Dragons. This collaboration between the talented Tris Morrison and Jess Goodwin will be a welcome addition to many High Elf armies, and at last enables you to field a High Elf general mounted on a dragon. Full rules for Prince Imric are included elsewhere in this issue. Forces of Chaos. Following hard on the heels of the Warhammer Armies Chaos box set comes 3 new releases for Chaos Generals this month. From the talented hands of Ali Morrison come an awesome new group of Chaos Warriors of Khorne together with a new Chaos Warriors command group. These fearsome fighters are among the most deadly warriors in Warhammer, spreading death and destruction in their lust for blood and skulls for Khorne. To accompany these warriors of chaos into battle are 3 brand new Flesh Hounds, the Demon Hounds of Khorne. These miniatures were created by Tris Morrison, and all of these latest releases for the Forces of Chaos can be seen on the Heavy Metal pages elsewhere in this issue. Here it gives you the prices for this month's Warhammer releases. Prince Imric, Lord of Dragons, a box set, is £19.99. Chaos Warriors, 2 miniatures per blister, is £4.50. Chaos Warriors Command, 1 miniature per blister, is £2.50. And finally, Flesh Hounds, 1 miniature per blister, is £2.99. Grand reopenings. Over the years, the hundreds of thousands of gamers who have visited our stores have left their mark, leaving some of them looking like they've been tramped through by a frenzied mob of boar boys. This year, we have decided to refit many of our shops to bring them back up to our high standards and make them even more bright and friendly. The best bit about all of this is that every time we refit one of our stores, we'll be holding a grand reopening, which means lots of brilliant deals and amazing bargains. Keep your eye on the pages of White Dwarf each month for the latest details about your local grand reopenings. Box Tree Books. Box Tree Books are about to release the latest volumes in their Warhammer fiction series. The first is Harlequin by Ian Watson. Set in the nightmare world of the 41st millennium, the story continues the vivid and macabre action of his previous Warhammer 40,000 novel, Inquisitor. Harlequin is having its initial release in a hardbacked collector's edition, and Ian will be one of the special guests at Games Day 94, where he'll be signing individual copies of exciting new novel. The second release is the Warhammer novel Beasts in Velvet. In this novel, Jack Yeovil continues to explore the adventures of the characters from his acclaimed book Drachenfels and Genevieve Undead. There is a spread talking about Games Day and how the last tickets are left. It is on Sunday the 23rd of October 1994 at the Birmingham National Indoor Arena. Games Day is the highlight of the Games Workshop calendar. Every autumn, thousands of gamers get together for a day of fun, excitement, games, competitions, and special events based around the Games Workshop hobby. This year, over 8,000 gamers will pack the National Indoor Arena in Birmingham for our biggest and best convention ever. Games Day 94 will feature Titan Legions and Space Marine battles, a massive Blood Bowl tournament, Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 knockout games, and some very, very special prize draws, as well as the hundreds of games that will be running all day. All the Games Workshop artists, Citadel miniature sculptures, games designers, and personalities will be there to answer your questions, preview future games, or just chat about the hobby. Don't miss out on this exciting event. Get your tickets now. There is also a small advert for VikingCon 13 on the 14th to 16th of October 94 from Friday to Sunday at Tarnaby Gymnasium, Tien Alley 5, Amager. VikingCon 13 is going to be Denmark's biggest ever gaming event. Bog and Ide will be demonstrating a full range of Games Workshop games and all the latest Citadel miniatures. For information, contact Robin Anderson or Martin Beck. There is further information on Games Day 94, tickets and how to get there. Advanced tickets for Games Day 94 are now on sale, priced £7. Entry to Games Day 94 is by advance ticket only and there will be no ticket sales on the day. Tickets are available from all Games Workshop stores or post-free from Games Workshop mail order. Our mail order telephone hotlines are open from 8 AM to 10 PM 7 days a week. How to get there. The National Indoor Arena Birmingham is undoubtedly the UK's finest indoor arena. The purpose-designed facilities are amongst the finest in the world and combine with an easily accessible location to make the National Indoor Arena an ideal location for Games Day 94. Further in the news. Further this month's Epic releases for Epic Titan Legions are Titan Legions, the box game for £34.99, Doom Diver Magna Cannon, 1 miniature per blister for £2.50, Imperial Hydra for 3 miniatures per blister, £4.50, and Elder Nightwing, 3 miniatures per blister for £4.50. Titan Legions. This month's biggest release is the long-awaited Titan Legions box game. Everyone at the Games Workshop studio has been working long and hard to produce this exciting introduction to the Epic game system. Designed by Andy Chambers, Titan Legions includes everything you need to fight out epic conflicts between the massive armoured fighting machines of the 41st millennium. Massive Titans. As well as a rulebook, Codex Titanicus, a scenario booklet, and hundreds of encounters and cards, Titan Legions contains dozens of new plastic miniatures. These models form the core of both an Orc and Imperial force and enable you to fight out the campaign, The Fires of Gehenna, which is included in the game. The centerpieces of the army are the colossal titans, one Imperator-class titan and not one but 2 huge Orc mega-gargants to pit against each other. Each of these fighting machines bristles with a vast array of devastating weapons. In this issue, Andy Chambers provides an introduction to the new Titan Legions, and Rick Priestley takes a look at the history and background of the Emperor's fabled Titan Legions. Epic releases. Also released this month are the first in an improved range of epic miniatures: Elder Nightwings, Imperial Hydra, and Orc Doomdiver Magna Cannon. Warhammer 40,000 news. Leman Russ. The Imperial Guard is reinforced this month with the release of the Leman Russ battle tank. The Leman Russ bristles with weapons including a las cannon, heavy bolters, and a turret-mounted battle cannon. The box set also contains a sprue of additional weapons and equipment, and a full set of transfers to allow you to make your Leman Russ unique. Elsewhere in this issue, we feature special rules for the Leman Russ and advice on vehicle tactics in general. Eldar Jetbike. Also released this month is the Eldar Jetbike box set. This sleek war machine strikes terror into its enemies as squads of jetbikes move swiftly to attack, their shuriken catapults spitting death. It has the prices for this month's Warhammer 40,000 releases. The Leman Russ battle tank, a plastic kit, is $14.99. Eldar Jetbike plastic kit is £4.99. Orc Storm Boys, 1 miniature per blister, is £2.99, and a Blood Axe Commandos, 3 miniatures per blister, is £4.50. Finally, Blood Bowl. Bill King, where are you? And there's a picture of Bill King, very 90s looking. We seem to have lost touch with fiction writer extraordinaire Bill King, famous for Gotrek and Felix. Bill, if you're reading this, or if anyone knows where he is, please give us a call. Blood Bowl star players. This month, Blood Bowl releases consist of 2 new star players, Count Luther von Drakenberg and Håkon Heartrekker, Dark Elf Assassin. Goblins. Also available now are 4 new goblins designed by Gary Morley. These titchy guys adjust the models to give your orc team an edge in the throwing game. It gives prices for this month's Blood Bowl releases. The Håkon Heartrekker 1 miniature per blister is £2.50. Luther von Drakenberg 1 miniature per blister is £12.99. And Goblins 4 miniatures per blister are £4.50. Now we're looking at the Epic Legions Into the Maelstrom by Andy Chambers. On the facing page is a full page image from Heavy Metal that shows 2 armies at war on a miniatures table. In red and yellow and blue, there is a bunch of Imperial forces fighting an Orc horde. Center point is an Imperator Titan. There is much cardboard terrain as well as felt green basing, some small trees, and a ruined castle. Into the Maelstrom by Andy Chambers. Andy is the man responsible for bringing the devastating power of the Imperator Titan and Orc Megagargant to your gaming table. In this special article, he gives a personal view of the development of the Epic Games system. Ancient history. Long ago, before even I sold my soul to the dark gods of chaos, a game was born into the world called Adeptus Titanicus. It featured huge bipedal war machines called Titans, battling through a war zone of looming city blocks. The game included plastic models of warlord titans and was simple enough to have a battle for supremacy involving 6 people, with each commanding a titan of their own. I fought, I won, I liked this game. I became absorbed by the dark and brooding atmosphere of a galactic imperium wrapped by the civil war known as the Horus Heresy. I discovered White Dwarf magazine and fervishly collected additional rules for the new titans and eventually infantry and vehicles to throw into battle, only to see them crushed underfoot by these gigantic war machines. I battled weekly, developing and collecting my own Titan Legion, Ordo Canis, guiding it through literally dozens of traps, blitzkriegs and offensive on the eternal battlefront. New ace Titan crews rose through the ranks and old ones crashed to their doom. The Wraithbone Titans and ironclad Gargants of the Eldar and Orc races arrived to do battle and taught me new ways to hurt. Another game came out exclusively featuring troops and tanks in epic scale called Space Marine. This was added to my growing collection, and squads of Space Marines and Land Raiders arrived to support Ordo Canis. Plans were afoot to create another game called Titan Legions, and whispers were heard of a monstrous class of Titan, bigger and more heavily armoured than any other. It was called the Emperor Titan. Eventually, I got to do some freelance work for White Dwarf, writing vehicle stats and army lists for the Epic system. My first piece to be published was about smaller humanoid war machines called Knights. that was all about 80 zillion years ago. The revised epic game. A few years later, the Space Marine game was revised and updated. The rules were streamlined so that battles were faster and larger armies could be used. A number of innovative new ideas were added to the game, such as the army cards you could use to choose which companies of troops and vehicles to fight with, objective counters to fight over, and a victory point system so that you could tell who had won the battle. Although I dearly loved the original Adeptus Titanicus / Space Marine game, I have to admit these new rules blew away the old ones. Battles now became knife-edge contests of tactical skill and daring. The new army cards included information on the morale value and the victory points of different formations, as well as their organisation into platoons and squadrons, making setup and play so much smoother. As we worked to produce supplements covering all of the major races, each army developed its own distinctive dynamics. The Space Marines were masters of the lightning-fast shock assault. The Eldar feinted and parried enemy attacks with their deadly mobile forces of skimmers. Orcs threatened to overwhelm the foe with their ferocity and sheer weight in numbers. The Squats were tenacious and commanded the most awesome firepower imaginable, whilst the demonic hordes of chaos could overrun and tear apart any foe in their hideously mutated path. And every month, as the rules developed, a plethora of new models appeared for every race, each with their own lethal capabilities. Amidst all this excitement, my one regret was that the emphasis of the epic game had shifted to troops and tanks rather than titans. Now, titans appeared in 1s and 2s to support the little guys rather than the other way around. It was intended that another supplement called, yes, you've guessed it, Titan Legions would bring back the titans to their rightful place of dominance, but Warhammer Fantasy Battle and then Warhammer 40,000 demanded attention, and Titan Legions slithered even further back onto the schedule until now. The Titan Legions box. This autumn sees the release of the long-awaited Titan Legions. Early in its development, we decided that Titan Legions should be no mere supplement to Space Marine, but a complete game in its own right. This has given us, well me, the opportunity to lavish as much attention on those awesome Titans as they deserve. The game now consists of 2 rulebooks, a mountain of templates and data cards, plus a city's worth of full-colour card fold-together buildings and rubble. What's more, some truly amazing plastic miniatures have been created so that the Titan Legions box contains 2 separate battle groups, one for the Orcs and one for the Imperial forces. The Orcs command several squadrons of Bonebreaker tanks, and not 1 but 2 monstrous Mega Gargants, giant mobile fortresses studded with battle cannon and mounting all sorts of weird and destructive weapons on towers and gantries, such as the Big Lobber, a Weird Boy Tower, and several cruise missiles. You may have come across ordinary Gargants before now and thought they were pretty big, but rest assured that they are utterly dwarfed by Mega Gargants. The Imperial forces include a household of knights, towering humanoid fighting machines armed with chainswords and battle cannon, but the heart of the Imperial battle force is the gigantic Imperator, an Emperor-class Titan mounting enough firepower to devastate entire armies. Yes, at last, after all those years, an Emperor Titan is available to smash the foes of humanity out of existence. The Emperor Titan and Mega Gargant models are both multi-part plastic kits which have exceeded all our expectations. They are designed to push together for convenience, but obviously most gamers will want to glue them together to create sturdier models. The detailing of rivets, guns and girder work on the Mega Gargant and the Gothic arches and columns on the Imperator Titan is exceptionally fine, creating a marvellous impression of scale. The Orc Bonebreaker tanks and Imperial Knights are each moulded as simple 3-part models which snap together without glue and provide admirable support to the Imperator Titan and Mega Gargants. All of these plastic models are of an excellent standard, highly detailed, and are indistinguishable from metal miniatures once painted. With such amazing models to work with, the rest of the game became a matter of ensuring that the Imperator Titan and Mega Gargant were as tough as they deserved to be. Developing the rules. The plan for Titan Legions was that the game should fit in with all the existing Space Marine rules and its previously published supplements, Armies of the Imperium, Renegades and Orc and Squat Warlords. In addition, both Titan Legions and Space Marine had to be able to stand alone so that either box set could be brought separately and be played as a complete game in its own right. Thus, the epic game system was born. Of course, this was just great in theory, but just how do you introduce gigantic new war machines like Emperor-class Titans and Mega Gargants into a set of game rules which covers nothing of comparable size? More to the point, how do you do this without upsetting the game balance of existing forces? even more to the point, how do you achieve all of this and also ensure that you can have an exciting and challenging game with just what's in the box? I decided that the Emperor Titan and Mega Gargant should both work by having a data card onto which counters were placed to control functions like movement and firing. This is quite different to troops and tanks in Space Marine, which use a single order counter placed at the start of the turn to dictate whether they remain stationary and fire, advance and fire, or charge forward without shooting at all. Having greater flexibility would make the Emperor Titan and Mega Gargant entertaining to fight with if you were just using the models in the Titan Legions box set, and make them tough opponents in games against more conventional forces. It also seemed natural that such huge machines would have space for troops on board, so these were also included onto the data cards, along with ammunition limits for some weapons, shield strength indicators, damage locations, weapon summaries, and many other pieces of information. The Mega Gargants. Early playtesting revealed that the Mega Gargants were overly complex to use. As a result, their data cards were simplified to make the troops on board act as a crew, and the Mega Gargants themselves were made to operate more like normal epic units. Apart from using a slightly more sophisticated set of older counters to control them in combat. This made them more fun to play, but they lacked individual colour, and so I decided to introduce the shouting counters. These represent additional orders being bellowed at the crew by the tough Orc Mega Gargant commander, things like Vol Zogging Speed Ahead and Warg. Their use really shows up the final subtleties of Orc command structures. To further diversify the Mega Gargants, I also decided to include a system of drawing the crew counters for your Mega Gargants at random. Each of these three types of crew squad, Knobs, Boys and Gretchen Riggers, have their own good and bad points. For example, a crew of mostly Riggers is great for fixing damage and fighting fires. It's Zog all use in a boarding action. Likewise, Knobs are marvellous for defending the Mega Gargant or attacking any army who would stray too close, but they won't dirty their hands doing Riggers' work. In this way, each Mega Gargant acquires its own unique personality and specific tactical value, which you can exploit in your overall battle plan. The Imperator Emperor class Titan. The reason the Mega Gargants had seemed over-complex was that their data cards were almost as large as one for the Imperator Titan, and the Imperator Titan data card was so huge we were worried it might not fit in the box. Most of this space, however, is taken up with locations for the Special Company of Infantry carried by the Titan, as well as its mammoth number of foiled shields and hit locations. The Imperator Titan works by allocating a number of plasma counters to powering up different functions, such as shields, weapons, and engines, in order to control how it moves and fights. This gives a very real trade-off between movement, firing, and defense, which makes it very enjoyable to fight with. I'm happy to say that the Imperator Titan worked just fine from the outset, and merely needed some fine-tuning to weapons and other areas to make it operate within expectations. Damage control. The next problem was to ensure that the Imperator Titans and Mega Gargants weren't too easy to destroy. Of course, both machines have numerous shields which absorb enemy fire before it can strike the fabric of the machine. However, shields can be chipped away with lighter weapons to open up the target for a killer blow with the real super heavy weaponry. To help solve this, I introduced one of the few major changes to the basic Space Marine rules by making energy shields harder to knock down with light weapons. But what about damage once the shields are down? With the Mega Gargants, this was relatively easy, as normal Gargants can only be destroyed by inflicting enough damage to start fires throughout their superstructure. As the fires rage out of control, the Gargant's ammo eventually blows and takes out the whole machine. By using the same system for Mega Gargants, but with the addition of crew squads who could fight fires, Mega Gargants proved to be exceedingly tough. The Imperator Titan can be destroyed by hits to vital locations such as its legs, command bridge, and plasma reactor. To compensate for this vulnerability and to represent the massively thick armor of an Emperor-class Titan, the Imperator makes its armor saving throws on 2d6 rather than 1d6 like ordinary Titans. This ensures that the Emperor can withstand withering barrages of fire even when its void shields are down. Now at last, battles between the Imperator Titan and the Mega Gargants are dynamic conflicts between two very different kinds of machines. The Imperator Titan is able to deal out massive amounts of damage and absorb plenty of punishment, but with a single lucky hit to a vulnerable location can bring the giant down with shocking ease. The Mega Gargants have smashed down even the Imperator's shields in short order, however, they can also be crippled relatively easily once their power fields collapse, and if the Imperator Titan can outmaneuver the Gargants and fight them one at a time, the Orcs are doomed. Updating the epic rules. Naturally, Titan Legions could contain an updated rulebook covering not only the rules for Imperator Titans and Mega Gargants, but also the basic rules for tanks and troops from the Space Marine game. I therefore took this opportunity to comb through all the questions we received about the Space Marine game system and attempted to resolve as many of them as possible. This proved easier than I had anticipated. The framework of the Space Marine rules was basically sound, and some areas, notably close combat, simply needed a little additional explanation and clarification. Likewise, the surmising of the special rules applying to flyers and the like, which had previously only appeared in individual vehicle descriptions, should help to resolve any difficulties and aid reference. Titan Legions also introduces a separate psychic phase to speed up play, as suggested by numerous Space Marine players. All the updating of the Titan Legion rules was aimed at maintaining the ease of play of the original Space Marine game and making only minor procedural changes to those rules. I hope that the Titan Legion's rulebook will serve to teach new recruits the epic game rules, as well as give hoary old veterans some information to fight with. Finishing touches. My final task was to ensure that Titans and Gargants would be the ultimate battle winners they started out as so long ago. The first step towards this was the introduction of some new army cards which covered Titan battle groups. These are similar to Gargant big mobs, which is to say they are small units of 3 Titans or Gargants which operate together on the battlefield. These Titans and Gargants have a cheaper points value to compensate for the fact that they must fight in close proximity and lack the flexibility of individual machines. However, the ferocious firepower of a Gargant big mob or a Titan battle group makes it a must for any commander. As we moved on to playing games with the Imperator Titans, battle groups and the rest, we soon found that the conventional forces could win games on victory points too easily. This is because in Space Marine both armies fight for control of 8 objective markers, which are worth a number of victory points each. The Titan heavy forces couldn't spread out to cover all their objectives, and the enemy could place many of the objectives in buildings or other locations that Titans couldn't reach. It was clear then that the battle groups and Emperor Titans plus their Orc opponents would need their own objectives to pursue if they were to have a fighting chance of winning the battle. Enter Titan and Gargant mission cards. These cover specific objectives for Titans or Gargants, like capturing particular locations, demolishing buildings, breaking through the enemy line, and so on. With different mission cards being given to each Mega Gargant, Emperor Titan, Big Mob and Battle Group, the big war machines could fight on even terms against more conventional forces. I also wanted to ensure that Titan Legions included some rules for Titans and Gargants gaining experience through fighting battle. Stealing unmercifully from the extremely worthy Blood Bowl, I put together a simple advancement table and a selection of mouth-watering crew and commander skills, plus Titan upgrades for all of the major races. Once more, you can feel the pride of Titans fighting their way up to A status and the agony of them being blown to smithereens. On this page, there is also an excerpt about the Titan Legions, but we'll come to that after we finish this story. On the next page, a large image showing 2 massive Imperator Emperor class Titans striding into battle against a Gargant big mob. The future. Titan Legions will herald a host of new releases for the already gigantic epic miniatures range. The Codex Titanicus background book in Titan Legions includes stats for several new vehicles, including a range of anti-aircraft weapons for shooting down those pesky skimmers and Thunderhawk gunships, which is, incidentally, being remodeled even as I write. Other newcomers include different types of knights, the Chimera Armoured Troop Transport and the Elder Nightwing Vita, which you can see in this issue. Also waiting in the wings are demon engines for Slanesh and Nurgle, as well as remade Lord of Battles for the ranks of the Blood God. Titans and Gargants will feature strongly in the new releases. More Emperor-class Titans are being designed around the plastic Imperator Titan model, using metal parts to replace the weapons and sections of the superstructure from the Imperator. Also on the drawing board is the smaller but no less deadly Warmonger Emperor-class Titan. Similarly, you can expect to see new variants of the Mega Gargant in the near future. The rather aged Warlord Titan will be replaced by an all-new metal version from the talented hands of Dave Andrews. Jess Goodwin has designed a new Eldar Scout Titan and a range of Exodite Dragon Warriors, as well as remaking the Eldar Avatar and Warwalker in epic scale. Norman Swales, is also hard at work creating a new range of Epipeptus Mechanicus super heavy war machines and squat juggernauts. As one gamer recently remarked to me, it's certainly going to be an epic Christmas. Tyranids. However, dark and voracious forces are gathered at the edge of the galaxy to ensure that all doesn't go well for the humanoid races. The marrow-freezing terror of the Tyranid hive swarms is also poised to seep into epic scale and prove the strength of flesh over steel. Despite being driven half-mad by the trauma of getting Titan Legions out in time, I am now scheduled to plunge into the visceral ooze of the hive mind and uncover the most dire secrets of Tyranid ground assault forces. If things go according to plan, an epic supplement detailing the Tyranid forces should be ready for release by February 95. A new plastic sprue including epic-scale Genestealers, Tyranid warriors, termagants, and other unspeakably monsters is already underway. An accompanying range of metal miniatures representing Tyranid biowar machines is being planned, including monsters as big as titans and other unspeakable things that walk or crawl or flap across the sky. Of course, whether the deadline is met depends on the progress of work here at the Games Workshop studio, and whether the Hive Tyrants suck my brains out before I win free of their chitonious grasp. Slurp. Back a page, the inset story goes as such. Kurgan jumped in spite of himself as the klaxon howled again. He couldn't believe they were still advancing. He stood with a dozen other tech guards gazing out of the arch window slits of the bastion. Outside, the darkness was lit by a flickering maelstrom of fire and explosions. Bolts, beams, and tracer fire rose out of the night across this entire field of vision. All of it incoming. Out of morbid interest, he flicked his camera eye to infrared so that he could see the shimmering of the void shields as they absorbed the shots directed at the towering form of the Imperator Titan. In the space before the klaxon howled a second time, Kurgan saw the shields flare yellow 3 times. 3 shields down. Cold sweat ran down his back at the thought of the shields collapsing altogether and letting that storm of enemy fire through. As the wailing tone of klaxon died, the guardsmen braced themselves and hung on. Kurgan grabbed onto the fluted pillar to the side of the window slit, planted his magnetized boot clamps in position, and let his lad's rifle dangle in one band like he'd been taught in basic training back on the Forge World. That seemed like a million years ago now, a half-forgotten dream in comparison to the stark reality of the war on Gehenna. His Imperator Titan had waded through entire Orc clans, shattering, killing and smashing them until their green blood washed the steps of his bastions. But the Orcs were fierce, brutal and relentless. They had fought dozens of battles without hesitation and looked set to fight a dozen more. There was a delay. Aha's half-heard, half-felt engines throbbed, before the floor shifted smoothly forward and the view through the slits tilted down to show cratered earth. The pit of Kurgan's stomach told him he was being moved forward and up, then down again. The bastion settled into place 60 meters ahead of its previous position with a reverberating clang. Hydronics squealing as they pushed its armoured stairways into the ground to anchor it. Kurgan caught sight of dust clouds and red-painted vehicles. A column of Orc baggies and war tracks was speeding forward through a tumble of shattered walls. He shouted to his comrades over the din of explosions and machinery, and they opened fire together. The red pulses of their lasers illuminated the ruins as he grinned as one of the ramshackle vehicles caught fire, skidded into another, and wiped out both of them in a fireball of twisted metal. The secondary batteries joined in, and the ruins were rent apart by the impacts of shells as the klaxon wailed and the bastion swept forward again. Now Kurgan could see a vast crater with the intact walls of a monolithic structure rising beyond. Smoke drifted across the scene, obscuring the base of the building. The incoming fire had slackened to almost nothing, but the quiet seemed ominous rather than reassuring. Wreckage was littered across the crater like weird metallic foliage. He murmured, half prayed to himself, that this graveyard of machines was not an encouraging sight. All sound suddenly became muted and distant as his ear protectors cut in automatically. After a breathless pulse, Kurgan felt his whole body quiver with the consciousness of one of the primary weapons cut loose. He prayed to the machine god that this wasn't the plasma annihilator, The princeps would only unleash those bolts of white-hot sunfire against something really massive, perhaps even big enough to threaten the casus belli itself. Kurgan glimpsed a detachment of knights disappearing into the smoke, their bright pennants flying bravely. Nothing else had changed. Suddenly, one of the distant city blocks was lit by dozens of gun flashes, and an instant later the bastion shuddered as a salvo of fire crashed into the shields outside. Kurgan struggled to keep his footing as he saw what he'd taken for a building advance in the cloud of dust. It's a mega-gargant, he thought, desperately, as the night flared white in the unmistakable uptechnic glare of the plasma annihilator. Moving beyond the story, Games Workshop Nottingham grand reopening page is on there, showing its opening on Sunday the 29th and 30th of October. There's also a whole double spread on Games Workshop, A World of Fantasy Gaming. The first thing you notice when entering a Games Workshop store is how different it is from nearly every other shop. Here you'll find not only all you need for the gaming hobby, but much more besides. With friendly, approachable staff and a vast range of citadel miniatures, you will find everything you need to build up an army for Warhammer 40,000, Space Marine, Warhammer, Blood Bowl, or Man of War. There is also a list of all the UK stores. On the next page, it shows a large page talking about epic Titan legions with an image we saw before. It says Apocalypse Titanicus, the Titan Legions Roadshow. On the ancient orc planet of Retalius IV, a massive war orc is gathering pace from a dozen neighbouring systems. Thousands of orcs are travelling to the planet in preparation for the crusade. Hundreds of mech boys have directed the labour of thousands of humans in order to raise the towering titanic forms of a score of mega-gargants over Retalius' now desolate plains. But the Imperium is determined to strike back. Before the devastating green horde begins to spread, the orcs must be defeated and their totemic effigies destroyed. By direct order of the Emperor, 12 Emperor-class Titans of the Legio Sinister have been dispatched to Retalius with orders to smash the War before its tide of bloody destruction spreads across the galaxy. The stage is set for a titanic clash. Throughout November and December we'll be playing this massive game of Titan Legions at the following stores, and all you need to do is turn up and play. All the miniatures will be provided as well as superbly made terrain, so just come along to join the fun. In November 5th, Turrock, 12th, Peterborough, 19th, Cardiff and 26th, Belfast, and December 3rd, Birmingham, 10th, Chester, then the Galaxy. Then there is a page on the grand reopening of a Games Workshop stores in Brighton and Bristol, my local. Now we're on the page and story regarding Warhammer Armies Painting Guide by Mike McVey. This month sees the release of the latest volume in the Heavy Metal series of books, the Warhammer Armies Painting Guide. Mike explains what the new book is all about and gives us a sneak peek of the Orc and Goblin section. The Heavy Metal series. The Warhammer Armies Painting Guide is the fourth book in the Heavy Metal series, and hopefully it will prove to be as popular and as useful as the previous volumes. As with the other Heavy Metal books, the Warhammer Armies Painting Guide is designed to be used in conjunction with the other volumes, so as little time as possible is spent re-explaining basic techniques and covering old ground. The Warhammer Armies Painting Guide. As the name suggests, this guide is all about collecting and painting Warhammer armies. It is designed to be a companion to the army books, but whereas they cover the background and rules for a particular race, the painting guide gets down to the business of putting together and painting a coherent army. The first part of the guide looks at the general techniques that are associated with painting a large number of models. Although at first this may seem a daunting task, once you've got the hang of the different painting styles required for the various parts of the army, it is simple to do and great fun. The second part of the guide then moves on to look at the different races and the way in which their armies are modelled and painted. At the end of each section, I've included a special miniature of some kind, either a conversion project or a spectacular paint scheme. On the next few pages you can see an extract from the Orc and Goblin pages, which would give you a taste of how the book is laid out. Each of the army sections deals with the most unique and characterful models from that particular race, from the basic rank and file troops to the most powerful and spectacular characters and army leaders. There is now an image showing Gorblim's orc and goblin horde preparing for battle. A beautifully set of painted models sits on felt with some trees in the background. There are a bunch of orcs and goblins, night goblins with banners and replete with weaponry. There is also a goblin riding atop a dragon. Orcs and goblins. Orcs and their smaller cousins goblins are a savage and brutal race, living for little else save warfare and killing. Their crude, tribal society is spread far and wide throughout the old world. Many of their powerful strongholds are situated in the World's Edge mountains, and from these they launch devastating raids against their enemies. The Empire, dwarves and elves have many times felt the ferocity of orcs and goblins on the warpath in the mighty war. The Orc and Goblin Army. Orcs and goblins are one of the most effective and popular armies in Warhammer. Many generals prefer the vast hordes of screaming greenskins to any other race. One of the reasons for this is the huge choice of troops available to an orc and goblin player. There are many different tribes from which you can choose your troops, from the tough and reliable Black Orcs to the wild and fast-moving Goblin Wolf Riders. This choice gives the Orc and Goblin General a lot of tactical flexibility so they can field a specifically tailored army depending on who the enemy is. You could even have an army comprising entirely of just one tribe, such as Savic Orcs or even Goblin Wolf Riders. More often than not, an army will be made up from a mix of several different tribes. This adaptability makes the Orcs and Goblins one of the most formidable of all armies. Orcs and Goblins are great fun to collect and game with. Many of their troops are mad and unpredictable to say the least. Whirling Goblin fanatics and crazed squighoppers can totally devastate enemy forces, or equally on a bad dice roll, they can turn on their own units. This element of danger means that commanding an Orc and Goblin army is certainly never dull. The Greenskins. Though there are many different Orc and Goblin tribes to choose from, including Savage Orcs, Night Goblins and Forest Goblins to name but a few, one thing of all of them have in common is the colour of their skin. All Orcs, Goblins and Snotlings have green skin, and even Black Orc skin contains a hint of green. This makes them quite distinctive. There's no mistaking an Orc and Goblin army on the battlefield. The shade of green can be varied. For example, I like to paint Orcs in a slightly darker green than Goblins to make them look meaner and tougher. The opposite is true for Snotlings. I paint these in a far lighter shade of green to make them look softer and more vulnerable. I have included a complete guide to painting Orc and Goblin skin on the next page. Orc and Goblin units. Because of the individual's low point cost, Orc and Goblin units are generally quite large. This is especially true of Goblins. To give them any chance at all in hand-to-hand combat, a unit of Goblins needs to be at least 20 to 30 strong, and units of 40 are not uncommon. It may seem like quite a daunting task to tackle such a large number of troops for a single unit, but in reality, it's no more time consuming than painting a smaller unit of High Elves or Emperor troops. Remember that Goblins are far smaller than most other races, and they have very little fine detail to paint. For example, Night Goblins are some of the quickest of all miniatures to paint. There is very little else to paint apart from the black robes and green faces and hands. You can also modify the unit painting techniques. When I'm painting Goblins, I usually work on 8 to 10 miniatures at once. Once you get going, you can paint huge units of Gobbos very quickly. Monsters and characters. As well as large rank and file units, Orc and Goblin armies also have a large choice of monsters and special characters. Trolls in particular add variety in character, and I have included painting details for them later in this section. You can also have ogres and even giants as part of your force. The Orc and Goblin Army book includes details of some of the most notorious warlords from history, and many of these are available as special character miniatures. Having one of these characters as your general adds some real colour and excitement to your army. Here outlines a page talking about how to paint Orc and Goblin skin. There are a couple of different ways you can paint Orc and Goblin skin. The first method is quick, and I use it when painting basic rank and file troops for the units. The second method is a bit more detailed and time consuming, and is used for unit leaders and character models. For rank and file troops. When you are painting rank and file troops, you need to adopt a method of painting that is quick but effective. I find the best way of doing this is to paint the flesh in 4 separate stages. The first stage is the base coat. On the miniature shown below, in this image there are 4, is Goblin Green. You need to make sure that the base coat is smooth and even, so you may need to apply a couple of coats of paint. When the base coat is dry, apply a wash of slightly thinned green ink. This will run into the recesses and provide effective shading. When the ink is completely dry, go back over the model with goblin green and apply a first highlight to the raised areas, being careful not to obscure the shading. The last step is to add a final highlight. For this I mix sunburst yellow into goblin green and apply this colour to the most prominent surfaces, paying particular attention to the face. The photograph on the left shows the 4 stages applied to a forest goblin, but the procedure applies to any orc or goblin model. Unit leaders and characters. The technique I use for painting leaders and individual characters differs from that shown above in a couple of ways. The main difference is that I start with a dark colour and apply lighter shades to create the highlights, so there is no base colour, shade and highlighting sequence. The finish is a result really effective, and you can apply as many shades as you want to make the result more subtle. I apply an initial coat of dark angel's green, though you could use any deep green with the same result. When this coat is dry, I paint over the surface with goblin green, just leaving the darker colour showing in the recesses to give deeper shading and definition. The next step is to start to highlight the skin. As above, I mix of goblin green and sunburst yellow, adding more yellow as the highlights get lighter. For the very top couple of highlights, I add skull white to the highlight mix. Depending on how much time I want to spend, I apply between 3 and 8 successively lighter shades for the highlights. That's quite a lot. Black Orcs. Black Orcs are the meanest and toughest of the Orcs tribes. They take war very seriously and pride themselves at being the best fighters. They are elite units in Orc and Goblin army, so it's worth spending a little more time painting them. Their skin is very dark green, almost black in fact, and requires a slightly different approach in order to paint it successfully. It is not possible to use the quick wash and highlight techniques you use for painting other rank and file troops, as the skin is too dark. The method for painting Black Orc skin is similar to that used for painting characters described on the previous page. The base coat for the skin is very dark. I use a mix of Dark Angel's green and Chaos black, sometimes applying a couple of coats to get an even finish. The highlights are built up first using Dark Angel's green, and then by adding Sunburst yellow to this. I keep the highlights small and limit them to the raised areas of the skin, especially the nose, cheekbones, ears and knuckles. This keeps most of the skin dark, but I apply green glaze if it starts to look too light. They are even easier to paint than other orcs. They always dress in black and red, only ever using contrasting colours on small areas of detail. Checks are the only form of decoration they use, and these can be applied to areas of armour or clothing. I also paint some parts of the armour red in order to brighten up the otherwise quite dark colour scheme. There are a bunch of pictures showing a Black Orc warrior and a Black Orc big boss. Markings and tattoos. Savage orcs and forest goblins are distinctly different from other tribes in that they cover their bodies in faces with war paint and tattoos. These are divided into 2 different types, geometric patterns and pictograms, both of which are applied in either blue or red. Geometric patterns. These are used mainly by forest goblins for the markings on their faces and limbs to take the form of bands or zigzags of colour, usually around the arms or legs. Savage orcs also wear the sort of well paint on their faces using bold shapes such as chevrons or lightning bolt patterns. Pictograms. These are used as tattoos on their bodies, and it's usually the case that they will only use one design and repeat this several times on different parts of their bodies. Snakes, bones, skulls and lightning bolts are most common designs and are applied boldly to large areas of bare skin. Don't try to make complex or fiddly designs, or the effect will be lost. Instead, stick to simple and bold ones. Boars, walls and spiders. Large parts of many orc and goblin armies are made up from mounted warriors, and the orc boar boys are amongst the hardest hitting and most feared of all cavalry. This page looks at the 3 different mounts for orcs and goblins, boars, wolves and spiders, and shows you how I go about painting them. War boars. Boars are huge and dangerous creatures and make ideal mounts for the equally ferocious orc boar boys. They are quite straightforward to paint and can simply be washed and dry brushed as described earlier in the guide. However, there are a few things you can do to make them look even better. As orcs are quite a bright green colour, it is important to paint the boars in a colour that contrasts with this. I prefer either a reddish brown or black. You don't have to make the colour constant over the whole boar. In fact, the colour scheme will be more effective if you add a little variation. It's best if you base coat, wash and dry brush the entire ball in one colour, then add areas of other colour. For example, if you paint the whole ball in a mid-brown, you can then add a darker band that runs right down the length of the animal's back, from the snout to the tail. Or if you're painting a black boar, you could add some lighter colours to take legs or round the snout. Markings and war paint look good on boars, and I usually add this around the eyes or on the rump. Bold geometric shapes work best, but simple pictograms such as skulls also look good. There is then a picture of an orc war boar, showing a skull on its thigh and below its eye a triangle. Giant wolves. You can use any of the huge variety of different colours to paint wolves, from jet black to almost pure white. The general techniques are the same as for painting boars. The highlighting and shading can be added with dry brushing and washing. The fade in colour is even more pronounced than on boars. In fact, my favourite wolf colour scheme is jet black along the spine, fading through brown to a creamy white on the underbelly. And legs. For this colour scheme, I start by base coating the whole wolf using bubonic brown. I shade using brown and black wash on the back, and use bubonic brown and skull white for the highlights on the lower body and legs. There is then a picture of a giant wolf. Giant spiders. Giant spiders are hideous creatures with gaping mandibles and bloated bodies. The forest goblins catch and train them to be ridden into battle. When painting giant spiders, I generally pick two strong contrasting colours and paint them almost entirely in these. The darker colour is used to paint the body, and this is faded through to the lighter colour on the face and legs. This gives a far more dramatic appearance than using just one colour. On the example shown below, I used dark brown faded through to blood red on one spider, and chaos black faded through to bubonic brown on the other. I highlighted the black with a touch of brown to make the blending between the two colours look more natural. Night goblins. Painting night goblins. Night goblins wear long ragged cloaks and hooded robes which protect them from the sunlight. These are always black. This makes them extremely quick and easy to paint. If I'm painting large units of night goblins, I break one of the golden rules of miniature painting and undercoat them black rather than white. The face, hands and other areas of exposed skin are then re-undercoated white to make sure that the skin comes out brighter. The black clothing can be decorated with red or yellow borders, or more commonly, a flame pattern running around the base of the robes or the edge of the hood. The symbols of the night goblins are a single eye or a moon, and these can be painted onto the clothing or shields. Examples shown at the bottom of the page, I added a simple flame design around the edge of the hood. Night goblin doom divers. Doom divers are particularly deranged night goblins who fire themselves from crude catapults into the heart of an enemy unit in the hope that they will cause large-scale devastation. The most distinctive things about doom diver models are the bat-like wings that are strapped to their arms. I usually paint these bright red to contrast with the green skin and black clothing. A base coat of blood red and red wash is highlighted with blood red and sunburst yellow. Special troop types. One of the most appealing things about night goblins is the huge variety of special troop types that are available to them, from the whirling bull and chain fanatics to the suicidal doom divers. Goblin fanatics. There are very little difference in the painting of fanatics from that of normal night goblins, but to identify them, I like to paint the diptych pattern on the clothing. Squid hunters and hoppers. Night goblins sometimes descend into the deepest tunnels to hunt and capture the dangerous cave squids. These enraged beasts are herded into battle and let loose on the enemy, where they wreak terrible damage. The most unhinged of the hunters actually ride squigs into battle. Painting squigs. Squigs are relatively simple to paint, consisting of just a round body, short legs and huge gaping maws. Really, there is not much fine detail to contend with. Bright red or orange are the best colours to use as they contrast sharply with the green goblins. I usually use a fairly thin coat of blood red and then highlight this with blood angel orange and sunburst yellow. The other main areas that need painting apart from the body are the teeth and claws. I base coat these with bubonic brown and use skull white for the highlights. That is the end of that story, and then there's a page showing another Games Workshop grand reopening in Liverpool and Beckenham. And then we move on to the story of Warhammer 40,000, the Leman Russ by Rick Priestley. The Leman Russ battle tank is the bane of the Imperium's enemies. In a lightning strike it smashes through the enemy line, its massive armoured side shrugging off attacks as its many weapons cut bloody sways through the ranks of their foe. The Leman Russ is the principal fighting tank of the Imperial Guard's armoured formations. It excels both in the close support role and as a powerful steerhead for the attack. Its dual main armaments of battle cannon and las cannon give it the ability to destroy large bodies of troops, as well as enabling it to knock out enemy vehicles and defense points. The Leman Russ battle tank is one of many potent weapons in the mighty arsenal of the Imperial Guard. This month sees the release of the new Leman Russ battle tank kit. This heralds the start of a new range of top quality kits from Games Workshop, which will include an Eldar jetpack, a Basilisk assault cannon, and a Chimera troop carrier for the Imperial Guard. All these kits are being designed to the highest standards with separate track sections and highly detailed parts. The original designs have been modelled by our resident kit guru, model maker, terrain architect and Golden Demon winner, Adrian Wild. Adrian is currently working on a few secret projects which I'm not telling you about, not even if you promise to buy me a pint. Dozens of battles. Needless to say, we've been gaming with the Leman Russ ever since the first trial mouldings arrived at the Games Workshop studio. We've been painting and modelling Leman Russ tanks and fighting them against our Orc and Eldar armies in a variety of scenarios. Like the boys say, it's a hard job, but somebody has to do it. The Leman Russ tanks have fought a part of Imperial Guard armies and as allies for Space Marines, where they were especially effective. We had one heart-stopping moment when an over-ambitious Blood Axe commander with a power axe came within a gnat's whisker of crunching his way through the side of a Leman Russ. On the whole, the Leman Russ tanks performed well, and we learned a few tactical lessons along the way. We also learned a bit about the Imperial Guard, an army we are just starting to work on. We have designed some new Imperial Guard models too. No, I'm not going to tell you about them. You can't even bribe me with beer either. Battle strategy. The Imperial Guard is a massive and brutal instrument of war. When it attacks, thousands of men and countless armoured vehicles move relentlessly towards their target. When it occupies a war zone, it forms a huge defensive battle line, which can extend for hundreds of miles. The scale of operations and resources is immense. If the swift, piercing attack of the Space Marines can be likened to a surgical incision, then the Imperial Guard is a hammer blow. Blunt, crushing, and unstoppable. The Imperial Guard fights in a way which reflects the massive scale of warfare in a major war zone. The army deploys across a long battle line which is usually held by foot troops. The role of these troops is to prevent enemy infiltration. Behind lines of other reserve formations, fresh troops which can be flung forward to bolster a falling line or to mount an attack. Reserves are made up of mobile forces such as infantry in armoured troop carriers and tanks. When the army is ready to attack, these forces are massed ready for the big push. When they are finally unleashed, the tanks and troop carriers strike at once, smashing the enemy with their sheer speed and concentration of numbers. Blitzkrieg. From behind their battle lines, the Imperial Guard is supported by heavy artillery. Immediately before an attack, these big guns are moved up to forward positions where they unleash a massive barrage of shell and fire. As the ground erupts into a maelstrom of explosions, the enemy are destroyed, beaten back from key positions or left stunned and confused. Before the smoke clears from this deadly barrage, the Imperial Reserves strike. In a vast tidal wave, they charge forward through the gaps blasted in the enemy foundations. The Imperial Guard has big guns like the highly mobile Basilisk, which are designed specifically for barrage work. In addition, tanks may be equipped with heavy battle cannons, which can also be used to add firepower to the barrage before an attack. A barrage is also useful in defense as an effective way of breaking up enemy attacks, destroying troops and vehicles before they reach the Imperial Guard's battle line. New rules. All the rules discussed here are at an early stage of development, and they might well change before we finally publish them. Rather than make you wait for the Imperial Guard Codex, we thought it'd be a good idea to reveal them right now so that players can use them in conjunction with the Leman Russ tank. Obviously, we'd like to test out the rules and to develop them more extensively, so be prepared to pitch in and change things or invent new bits. If you do, then why not write and tell us? We always appreciate helpful comments or interesting ideas about new rules. Difference. Reserves. When the Imperial Guard army deploys its forces, any vehicle and troop carried in vehicles may be held in reserve. Reserves are not deployed on the battlefield at the start of the game, but are held back until the battle has begun. You do not have to tell your enemy what you have placed in reserve. At the start of any of your turns, you may bring any reserves onto the battlefield, declare which vehicles you are going to bring on, and place them on your own table edge. These may be moved as normal during their turn when they appear. Vehicles may enter at any speed to represent the lightning-fast strike of these massive formations. This is a big advantage because it means you can bring on a tank or troop carrier at fast speed. Remember that vehicles which deploy normally are restricted to slow speed at most. In effect, you can move a speeding armoured column straight to attack from a reserve position, arriving at your target sooner than if you had deployed normally. After both sides have deployed but before each side has taken its first turn, the Imperial Guard can bring down a mighty barrage of fire upon its enemy. This is worked out by allowing any battle cannons already deployed on the tabletop to fire once at any targets in the normal manner. In addition, any battle cannons held in reserve may shoot at maximum range against any target that is visible to at least one of your multiplied models. This rule enables the Imperial Guard to open up a hole in the enemy's lines which can be exploited very effectively with an armoured thrust from reserves. These barrages also give the Imperial Guard player a chance to knock out key weapons or characters before the battle gets underway. Army list. Leman's Russ battle tank takes 205 points. The Imperial Guard army may include Leman Russ battle tanks. A Leman Russ battle tank is crewed by 5 Imperial Guardsmen wearing flak armour, 6+ save, and carrying a las pistol. See Leman Russ battle tank data facts for details. It then gives you the data points for it. It also gives you data points for Imperial Guard, troops, and tank commanders. Crew options. Entire crew may exchange their flak armour for carapace armour at a 4+ save at an additional cost of 15 points. The battle cannon gunner may be upgraded to a tank commander as an additional cost of 10 points. The tank commander is a champion character and is therefore allowed 1 war gear card. Frag defender. The frag defender round is a special kind of auto-launcher ammo. If the Leman Russ is fitted with auto-launchers, then they may be upgraded to fire this round at an additional cost of 5 points. Instead of firing 3 shots in the normal pattern, the frag defender is launched straight up to explode in a gigantic outburst above the vehicle, scattering shrapnel and fragments of spinning metal over a wide area. Unlike normal auto-launch ammo, the frag defender rounds may be fired at any point in the game, including the hand-to-hand phase before any other models attack. When it is fired, any model touching the vehicle sustains S4 hit with a -1 save modifier. Models wearing flak armour receive the +1 armour save bonus for being hit by a blasted weapon and will therefore save on the D6 roll of a 6. Note that the auto-launchers loaded with frag defender ammo may still only fire twice per battle. There then is a page showing a data card for the Leman Russ battle tank and how you can cut it out and assemble it between a sheet of cardboard from a cereal box. It gives you all the vehicle data, the track damage table, the hull damage table, heavy bolter damage table, and the turret damage table, and the weapons data. Moving on, there is a double-page spread of heavy metal Leman Russ Imperial battle tank. On the first page it shows a Leman Russ of the 12th Necromunda Regiment of the Imperial Guard. It has an army badge. Every piece of equipment and in theory every trooper's uniform should display an army badge. This insignia assists in the administration and movement of the vast amount of military hardware and personnel deployed throughout the galaxy and helps prevent friendly fire accidents. Here the Necromunda 12th logo is a blue star on a white background and it has Necro written in impact font with Roman numerals of XII set between 2 bars. The regiment name. There are literally thousands of different Imperial Guard regiments ranged from thousands of worlds. Regiment names are typically displayed in this shorthand style, like Necro 12 is the 12th Necromunda Regiment. Company and squadron markings. Each Imperial Guard tank company is distinguished by 2 main features: a series of broad stripes painted onto the hull of a turret of each vehicle. In this instance, the company symbol is a 5-pointed star. Each squadron is the company displays a different coloured version of the symbol. Here, the second squadron's colour is blue. Apologies, the army badge is a white skull on a black diamond background. Tank numbers. Imperial Guard tank number squadrons typically comprise 3 vehicles, and this number simply identifies which is which. Here we are showing 2. The next page talks of camouflage. Camouflage. All Imperial Guard units paint camouflage schemes on their tanks and vehicles. The commanders and crews adapt standard patterns to suit the local terrain or the shape of their vehicle. Crews sometimes combine 2 or more camouflage schemes together or add smaller patches of colour stripes or other features. There are many vehicle camouflage patterns, of which 6 of the most effective are shown below. The camouflage schemes are patterns only and the colours may vary from army to army. The first is a zigzag of white and blue. Then there's a more jungle-like pattern of earthy colours. Then there's a more field and grass pattern. Then there is a blue and orange pattern. Then a dark grey with black and a pair of blues. It then shows an image of a Leman Russ of the Hells 57th Regiment of the Imperial Guard. And below, a large picture of a Leman Russ of the Turin 21st Regiment supporting an Ultramarines attack. There is a ruined cathedral terrain in the background and is on green felt. The next page shows a set of 4 vehicle cards which you can cut out and stick onto and between a layer of thin cardboard from a cereal packet, and they talk about ceramite armour, vortex detonators, ablative armour and electro holes. Each of these take different points. The ceramite armour is 50 points, the vortex detonator 50 points, the ablative armour 15 points, and the electro hull 10 points.